Growing up, I lived in northeastern Arizona, literally about 5 miles south of the Navajo reservation in Winslow. Naturally, being that close to the reservation's Skinwalker were a huge topic of conversation amongst the locals, and we all took it very seriously. Stories of personal experiences abounded. I was no different. Well, to start off my set of stories, I was about 9 or so. My family had gone camping in a little spot about 50 miles or so south of town called Hart Canyon, near Wiggins Crossing, if anyone is interested. We had been there all day, and I was extremely familiar with the area, as we had camped there 20 or so times before. So my parents let me just wander about, alone in the woods. This was back in the early 90s. Anyway, I had some G.I. Joes that I had been playing with in the nearby creek, about 80 yards from our campsite. There were not other campers there with us. My mom had called me back to camp for dinner, so I left and ate, played around camp for a while and realized that I'd forgotten my toys back at the creek. So I took a flashlight and headed back that way. I knew right where I had left them, so in no time I found them and grabbed them up. As I was squatted down to grab them on the edge of the water, a sudden urgency that I'd never felt before ran down my spine. I remember feeling frozen because of the fear. Like the little boy on E.T. when the alien comes out of the field for the first time and he's trying to scream for his family. I looked up and pointed my flashlight to the other side of the creek, and about 10 yards down the way, I saw something. At first I thought it was a deer, but it was standing up, so I thought it may be a bear. But it was too skinny and not enough poofy hair. It hid behind a tree and peered out slightly at me. I seriously was too scared to move. I had just read a bit about Bigfoot for the first time, since it wasn't really popular in my area. I thought for a long time that that's what I saw. I finally had seen enough to gather my wits and scram as fast as I could back to camp. I told my parents, and they kind of dismissed it as my imagination, so I just stayed close the rest of the trip. About 2 years later, I was at my house. I had 2 dogs. They were outside dogs, lived their whole lives in my backyard. One night, they went psycho. Barking at first at something in the alley behind my house, then they both started whimpering. I had my window open slightly, and one of my dogs straight up jumped up to the window, frantically chewed through the screen of the window, forced its way into the house, and would not leave the house for 3 days. Another time when I was about 13, we used to play night games in the town. Mostly, there being nothing much else to do. We would walk around our neighborhood and act suspicious so the cops would come chase us around. And we run down the alleyways and hop into random folks' backyards to hide. Now, it was extremely common to see an intoxicated Navajo or Hopi in the alley, or the street. So it was no big deal to see one in the alley behind my house that night as we being 2 of my friends and myself, ran from a police car hot on our tail. We saw him plain as day, standing in our way. We ran around him and jumped into the nearest yard to hide. We waited for the cop to pass us and hopped back out. Literally about 3 minutes went by. We ran back the way we came, and as we got to the point where the Indian had been, he was gone. Legit. In his place was a coyote sitting there watching us. We ran right past it, feet from it. And anyone who knows coyotes knows they will bail out way before you get close to them. This bugger held his ground and calmly sat and watched us run past him. We all freaked out and stayed inside for a month. When I was about 15 or 16, my brother has a girlfriend that lived in a small community south of Winslow called Starlight Pines, about 25 miles-ish. Well, we went to go see her one day, and as we drove out, about 15 miles out, we saw an Indian guy standing on the side of the road, which was quite odd because the res was north of town, and it was rare to see anyone on foot south of town because it's just desert and forest for literally 80 miles. Anyway, we see this guy. He looked normal enough. Flannel shirt, jeans. We got to our destination and hung out with my brother's GF and her family well into the night when we decided to head back home. Hopped in his truck, a Chevy S10, and drove back the way we came. In the same spot, we saw the Indian dude. He was still there. I remember thinking, that dude is crazy standing out there all day and into the night. What's he doing? Right as we pass at him, we hear a loud bang on the back of the truck. At first, I thought we hit an animal, but I hadn't felt anything that we'd run over. I turned around and looked out the back window. My brother started to slow down, thinking there may be something wrong with the truck. In the brake lights, I see the Indian guy chasing after us. We are easily going 55 to 60 at this point as we were about to stop. The guy is in the road, feet behind us. I scream at my brother to not stop. "Gun it, man. Gun it." He does, and being a Chevy S10, it had a speed governor on it at 80. 2 miles. 2 miles. This guy keeps up with us. We are seriously freaking out. I asked my brother, "What if we don't make it back to town, or what about when we have to slow down once we get close?" After those 2 miles that stretched forever, I looked back, and he was gone. We got home, booked it into the house, and told our parents. Next morning, I get up to head somewhere and look at my brother's truck, thinking about the night before. I wondered what the loud bang was just before we started getting chased. Inspecting the truck, I found a handprint smeared in the dust from about 2-3. Over to the right, then smeared to the right taillight. I never went there again. I can't confirm if this is a skinwalker or not, but this doesn't exactly sound like animal behavior. My mate's family has some land in the mountains of Montana, just a few hours down the road. He told me this story about going hunting with his nephew. It was early morning, and they were the only ones hunting in this area. They were walking down the trail with him leading when he saw a severed cow leg blocking the path. He kicked it out of the way so his nephew wouldn't see and just kept going. It's not unheard of to find shit like that just walking around Montana. He was a little concerned that a mountain lion could be about, but just kept going. They end up on a completely separate path and find the same cow leg. Not just another cow leg, more like someone saw him kick it out of the way and grabbed it and put it in front of him again. This spooked him for sure, and he got the hell out of there. He ends up running into a neighbor later that day, who was telling him about a very old bobcat that lives on the land that will actually approach some hunters if it trusts you enough. My friends seemed pleased with that and came to the conclusion that the bobcat was just messing with him. I'm not too confident, though. I've never heard of an animal doing something like that, no matter how smart they are.